So most people think that leadership is about power, vision, or charisma. But the most effective leaders, especially in real estate and business, lead by serving. The problem is servant leadership is often misunderstood as being soft or passive. But in reality, it's the hardest and most impactful kind of leadership that you can practice. In this episode, John and I, we're going to be unpacking why servant leadership wins every time, how we practice it at Faris Capital Partners, and how we implemented this in the past businesses that we've been building as well, and the surprising return on investment of leading with humility, clarity, and care. John, it's great to be here with you.
Good to be here, Mark. We had known each other for about 4 years before we launched this business, so it was an awesome opportunity to get to know each other and how we sort of thought about business, talked about business, our moral and ethics, and we both had that same kind of servant leadership mindset. And you're right, it is that idea. Sometimes it seems soft or like kumbaya or whatever, but in reality, we're super tight, right? Like we have high expectations, we set high goals, and we hold people accountable to metrics. It's really about in this sort of way that you implement, right, in the process. And so I'm excited to dive in today because I think it's really an area that is lacking, not necessarily even the servant component, just leadership in general, because sometimes people mistake, giving out orders as leadership, right? Leadership is leading by example. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So really excited to dive into this topic.
Yeah, for sure. And we see this with, the strongest leaders out there when you go back in history is generally the leaders that they will say they led for long periods of time is that they had a genuine love for the people that they were leading. And I
Yeah.
think this genuine love of people is at the heart of servant leadership. It's really like, you have the pyramid where you got the leader on top generally is how it is, and everybody's there to serve the leader. But in reality, the leader actually puts himself on the bottom on the org chart, or they flip the pyramid upside
Yeah.
down and they say, you know what, I'm here to serve you. And it's like, we're not only I'm here to serve you, but I'm here leading by example. And the mission is actually above all of us. And you sit above me where you don't need to say, hey, I'm the CEO. I'm the
Right.
leader. Listen to me. It's like you lead front by example. And the companies, and even if you look at the countries in history, the ones where the leader ruled for long periods of time in general, they had a genuine love for their people. And then you look at like the Hitlers and Mussolinis out there. I mean, that was more lead by brute force, and
Yes.
you can see how that ends up for them.
That's right. Yeah, I think about Dwight D. Eisenhower a lot because he was the president during World War II when D-Day occurred. And the night before D-Day, right? And imagine this was a mission that was somehow kept secret. I mean, they were able to pull this off with minimal knowledge from the Germans or the Axis powers. But what he did is he sat down, he wrote two speeches that evening, one in case of success and one in case of failure. And I'm paraphrasing here, but in case of failure, he said, the responsibility is mine and mine alone if this did not work out. And it's interesting now because in politics, we often see, each administration in the US blaming the last administration. Well, this isn't my economy.
Yeah.
It's, Trump's economy, or it was Biden's economy or whatever. And it's frustrating, right? Because at the end of the day, the buck has to stop with somebody, right? And that's how we view it. If Jocko Willink is someone we had the pleasure of seeing speak a few years ago, and I know we both read Extreme Ownership, but I think the military has it right. It's the idea if the mission fails, it's not just one person's responsibility. It was the leader's responsibility for not communicating clearly enough down the line on what their expectations were and what the plan was. But it's also the responsibility of the soldier for not gaining that clarity or asking those questions, right?
Mm.
And so everybody's responsible ultimately. And so, clearly defining, the outcomes, clearly defining what's important to the organization through mission, vision, and values, but even taking it a step further, like who ultimately holds accountability for this, right? So at the end of the day, if it's something related to the business, like who had that responsibility? If it was something legal, we know whose responsibility that was. If it was something due diligence related, we know whose responsibility that is. But the cool thing is it's less about accountability, it's more about clarity. So that person knows, oh, I've got to own this, right? And so you see it a lot in organizations where something goes wrong and everybody's like pointing in a million different directions, right? Instead of saying, well, that was mine, I own it. So, I think it's like Simon Sinek said, leaders eat last, right? We create space, we give clarity, and then our job is largely, in a sense, to get out of the way and let the person the autonomy to execute
Yeah.
on our expectations.
For sure. So, John, the listeners out there, they're like, "Oh, this is a real estate podcast. Why are you talking about servant leadership? Why do you think, from your perspective, that servant leadership is so important when you're investing in real estate? I mean, how do the two connect the dots, if for perspective for the listeners?"
Well, so I would put it simply like this. What we're actually doing is we're buying a lot of businesses, right? So every building we buy is a business. And so that business has staff, right? We have property management team, we have a maintenance team, we have multiple contractors we're working with, we have residents that we have to look after and take good care of. So there's just a lot of moving pieces. And so if you and I had to be in charge of every single decision at every single level, the whole thing would fail, because ultimately, I might be on a call, like we're recording a podcast right now, and something could be happening at the property level, but because we've clearly defined who is in charge of what and who has accountability for what, our asset manager Georgia can make a decision. And
Yeah.
knowing the framework in which we make decisions through our values, having a system for how we make decisions. I mentioned this on the last, recently we were on a call with some investors, but knowing that there's a tropical storm in the middle of the Gulf right now. It doesn't look like it's heading towards Florida, but we're aware of it, right? And so if you and I had to be the one to make a decision or tell people what their marching order are on a daily basis, things would get missed. We would stub our toes, and important details could be missed. So, it really starts. It's interesting. We almost have to back up a little bit. It really starts with building the right team from the start, right? And getting
Yeah.
the right players on the team and making sure that their behavior suits their role. So it's not just something you can do with any group of people, right? You have to have the right group of people. But when you get that right group of people, you hire for talent, you hire for behavior, you clearly define the role, and then you create space for feedback and, problem solving, but then let them go do their job,
Yeah.
Alex Hermosi, somebody you and I both really appreciate in terms of his thinking about business. It started with marketing, but now he's really getting into systems and process. He's very intelligent. And even just recently, he said an email, right? So many companies fail or flatten out because the leader can't let go. The leader can't find the right talent to build the systems to help get that scale, right? So at the end of the day, companies that are largely successful is because the CEO is focused on the vision. There's a team of operators underneath. There's a good, clear accountability structure, but people have the ability to make decisions based on those frameworks we've created.
So well said. And John, you said there were tons of nuggets in there, but what you said first is we are buying businesses.
Yeah,
When we're buying a piece of real estate, we're buying a 100-unit apartment building, we're buying an active business in that. And so what some listeners may not know is that we have a full-time team of 8 at Faris Capital. That's, we meet on a daily basis. Every single day we're talking about what's going on, our key priorities, and any stocks, challenges, or reporting metrics. There's that side of it. So John and I, as leaders in that company, like, that is really important that we have that mindset. But then it actually goes further than that. There's the property management at the property level that needs to be properly led and managed. It's like coach and led. I like better than managed. Right?
that's right.
And,
That's it.
and so there's the property managers, but then there's also building the community. And the community is something that's really, I think, is overlooked a lot. Is like, they need strong leadership to build a stronger community or stronger culture in all of these apartment buildings that we're buying. We're crafting, curating what the culture is of all of our assets. And then it goes a step further past that, is all of our power team, our key resources, all of our key people that help us take these assets down, and then ongoing in regards to services, they are an extended part of that team that also need leadership. And so when it comes to investing in real estate, the servant leadership mindset is very, very, very applicable. And it goes back to the fact that, yeah, we're buying businesses, but then it reaches out so much further than that as well when you're buying real estate.
That's it. Yeah, 100%. And One thing I had to learn early on, Mark, when I first got my first leadership role, is I thought, I have to have all the ideas. I have to make all
Yeah.
the decisions, right? And so I would go into a meeting and I would talk for 45 minutes in an hour long meeting, right? And I worked with this really
Yeah.
great executive coach, and he said, well, number one, you're like 600 feet away from the problem. You're in Alpharetta, where your office is, and you're trying to make a decision for the Raleigh team, in North Carolina. The people closest to the problem are likely to have the best solutions, right? And so what he really taught me is to listen more than I talk, right? And so creating space for others to think. And by the way, when you're talking, you're not thinking, right? In fact, one of the things he shared with me is like, if you ever watch an attorney, right, or if you watch a judge, particularly in the South of the United States, they talk really slowly. They, don't speak quickly. And I'm a little guilty of speaking quickly, fast, but it's that idea. The reason they're doing is they're allowing their brain to process. So he really coached me on slowing things down, talking less. And so I flipped the script and I'd go into meetings. It's an hour-long staff meeting or operations meeting. And I only talked about 10% of the time. And what was so amazing is watching the team solve these problems in front of my eyes. And then what I could do is maybe just put a bow on it and say, you know what, I love these three ideas. To me, I think number two is the best solution. Let's run with that one. And the best part is now there's ownership and buy-in from the team because they created. It wasn't a marching order. It was more of a collaboration. And look, there are times, Mark, where you and I have to say respectfully, I hear you, but we're doing it this way,
Yeah.
right? As a leader, you sometimes still have to make those decisions, right? And you have to
Yeah.
maybe, communicate like, hey, this is critically important to us. This is not a step we're skipping on this one. Or respectfully, I think I have a better solution. But how many great ideas I've sourced from the team that sometimes we don't even implement for 3 years. It's just like, wow, that was a neat one, but maybe not for today. I'm going to write that down, stick it in the file, and come back to it later. So yeah, that to me is another really big benefit here when you kind of now have a brain trust that you've created, not just one person, right? There's 10 people. In our context, we have 8 full-time team members that are all putting their thoughts and best foot forward. And, it's interesting because I mentioned the component about the people close to the problem, but sometimes there's another thing that can happen where the person a little further removed sometimes can see it through a different light
Yeah.
because the person has the problem right here, but somebody over here is like, well, I'm not experiencing that problem, but have you thought about this, right? So it's why our huddles are so critical to our success because we're surfacing issues on a daily basis. Our level 10 meeting, right? Because we're diving in and we're discussing issues that are impacting the organization, sourcing ideas from the whole team, discussing and then solving it, and then building an accountability structure, like who's owning this and when will it be delivered by kind of approach.
So good, so good. And just to kind of build on what you're saying about like coming up with all the answers as the leader, servant leadership is really it's about developing and coaching others to make better decisions. Like that's if you can do that, if you can grow people, I mean, you're invaluable to an organization. Because John, that's that I went through that as well, that period where it's like, yeah, you ask me a question, then I give the answer. And it feels good because you help them, but you're
Yeah.
you're not basically developing and growing. You're like the go-to. And now you got to solve everybody's problems. And that works to a certain degree, but then as you start to scale up, then you start to slow down the organization because everybody's coming to you and they can't make decisions. So one
Yeah.
of the best things that I learned through the years is this 1-3-1 concept. And so I heard about it from originally Darren Hardy, and I know Dan Martell in his book Buy Back Your Time dove into it as well. And the idea is when somebody comes into your office and they say, yeah, I got this problem there. Well, the first thing is the one is you basically ask, okay, what's the problem we need to solve? And that's actually a pretty tough thing to summarize in as few words as possible what truly is the problem, because sometimes they'll bring you a problem that doesn't even need to be solved. Once
Yeah.
they hear it out loud, they're like, I got this problem. It's like, okay, does the problem need to be solved? And but first, let's clarify exactly what it is. So once we're all agreed, okay, this is a problem or a challenge, then you ask them, okay, what are 3 potential solutions for that challenge or problem? And that'll like throw them back a little bit, but they're going to sit there and they're going to think, oh, I could do this. And you're forcing them to think.
Mm.
And then you could do that, or, I could do this. Is like, okay, great. Which of the 3 do you think is best? And then you're coaching them to come up with ideas and then to actually make a decision and decide on one. So for some people that might be very hard to go through, but you basically You coach them to make the decisions. You say, as soon as they say they're one, if it sounds and makes sense to you, say that's a great idea. Again, it goes
Yeah.
back to what you were saying, John. It came from them, so they're going to be more committed to it. But then the next time they come in, and you do this a couple of times, they're not going to be coming to you. It's like, they're going to do the 1-3-1, or they're going to ask me what I think, right? So
Yeah.
now you're coaching them. Now you have a decision maker out there that's empowered and has been coached, and you've made that person a better. That's the idea of servant leadership. If you can
Right.
do that in every role within an organization, and you have decision makers, and I know we have our core values, John, that they decide through. So you give them other decision making tools, then you're going to get great decisions, consistent decisions, very timely, and the business can continue to propel and grow as you grow and scale up.
Yeah, you said it earlier, coaching, right? This is coaching, not controlling. And in fact, I used to
Yeah.
call it don't pass me the monkey. In other words, don't make your problem my
Right.
problem. Like, I'm
Yeah.
happy to
Yeah.
talk through
Hey,
it, right? But
stop throwing your monkeys on my desk, right? It's
yeah,
like,
that's
no,
right.
take your
That's it,
monkey.
And
Yeah.
it's like, tell me how you're thinking about solving this problem versus here's what to do, because you are right, if not careful. And it's actually a challenge for a lot of like, people oriented leaders, right? Because they love people and they want to help, but they do create a crutch, right? Because ultimately now that person knows, well, I'll just go to John. He has all the answers and he has all the solutions. So that's where scaling breaks down, because ultimately you can't be involved in every single little minute decision, right? And a lot of this too is really about protecting the culture, right? When everything goes back to those values, it's like, oh, you have this tough problem. What are some potential solutions? Hey, does that solution align with our value of first class service? Well, maybe not. Okay, then let's filter that, right? Let's look at another solution or another potential option. And you take it a step further, right? Praise publicly, coach privately, right? You don't, call somebody out in a group meeting and put them into an uncomfortable position. And by creating that safety net where people know they can come to you with problems, and that you're also going to be willing to give them feedback when they make a mistake. We're all humans, we make mistakes. And what I really value about our working relationship, Mark, is you and I aren't exempt from that. You come to me after presentation and go, how did it go? What are your thoughts? And you're open to that feedback. And similarly with me. And so, it needs to be that kind of culture where everybody is accountable to those values, right? Those fundamentals, like we show up on time, these things that were so important to our organization. We have to be that example. Otherwise, the whole thing breaks down. Like we have to live the values, right? So,
For
um,
sure.
and I would say, for me, a big part of this too is really like seeing the whole person, and understanding that, you know, yes, these are employees, but can we treat them more like partners, right? Understanding their parents potentially, they have a spouse, they have loved ones, they have things that are happening in their life. So it's really knowing your team as human beings first, because when you build that level of trust where you really understand who they are and maybe some of the challenges they're going through, Mark, I'm sure you've experienced, but I've helped people with divorces, health
Mhm.
issues, all sorts of
Yeah.
things. And so, that kind of experience where people know that it's not just about the bottom line, it's not just about the result, it's about the human connection, and that
Mm.
we're partners here working together. To be clear, we have clear lines, right? Employee versus friend, right? Like we don't, I can't speak for you, but I don't go drinking and hanging out with, people who work for me after hours, right? But we could still have
Yeah.
that personal relationship where they know they can come to me, because let's face it, life does impact employee performance from time to time. And so when you create that space and you give that to people, what I found is that they actually will step up and blow you away, because you just showed that you cared. And it has to be real. That's the bottom line. You
Yeah.
can't fake this kind of stuff. It has to be real. But good news is it can be developed. It is something you can work
Yeah.
on and develop over time.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of things, John, that come to mind here. The first one is this idea of you think you need to know everything, and you need to be able to show people how smart you are. There's actually, this came from, I was in kind of a smaller room. I think there was about 15 very high net worth individuals all around the table, and there's this billionaire speaking to us, and he was telling about his story about how he built this company up, and he said when he became CEO, for the first while, he was trying to show everybody how intelligent, how his abilities, right? So that was
Mhm.
his main focus, is he needed to prove himself as being an intelligent leader. And he said he wasn't getting traction from that approach. And so he switched his approach to really focusing on showing the team members that he had their best interests at heart as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, as soon as I shifted that, then everything changed. He found support from that, and they in his position, he actually thrived in his position a lot more than trying to kind of prove to everybody how intelligent he was. And what was interesting from that is, like, if you're in the position, as long as you don't you're not doing any stupid things on a daily basis, they see that you're there for a reason, right? Of course, you got to make wise decisions and whatnot, but my heart is that I want what's best for you as well, and we're making decisions. Here's how this impacts and helps you as well. That just changed everything for him. So that was a really good key lessons that I took from that, and it kind of really ties into what you had initially said about it's easy to think that you need to know everything.
That's right. And I think you might be listening to this and maybe this was a newer concept to you. You say, well, like, how does this work in business terms, right? Well, at the end of the day, if your people feel supported, heard, listened to, and they feel like they have autonomy, within the bounds that we've set, we set guardrails, obviously, you're going to have higher retention, right? And, the cost of a bad employee can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, let's just say you hire, a salesperson and you're trying to control everything they do and their conversions are, 50%, less than maybe, the other salesperson on the team. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income and opportunity. But just the turnover cost, the cost of having to find new talent, bring them in, train them up, you're losing a lot of opportunity there. Better morale, right? Better productivity, right? If people feel that value that I just mentioned, they're going to show up and they're going to do the work. In fact, there's times where I've had a previous company, even at Faris Capital, where I'm getting emails from somebody on Sunday and I say, hey, like, I love this, but, go spend some time with your family, right? And, but it's like they feel so supported, they're willing to put those extra hours in, right? And then that ownership that we're able to help them feel, that by creating the guardrails and allowing them to work within those guardrails equals better decision making, right? So it's bottom line, you can go faster and go farther when you have this kind of leadership style in place.
For sure. And kind of to kind of tie this together, because the flip side of this, and I'd said it in the intro, that it's very easy to think like, servant leadership is about being soft and caring and loving and da-di-da, like Cupid kind of BS.
Yeah.
And the reality is so our first core value is like a genuine love of people, right? And so this is, when you look at it, there is like having that genuine care, that genuine love of people is important. But then, if you do have a genuine love of people, having tough conversations and telling truth is a big part of loving on somebody as well. It's like, I know you can do better than that. I know that there's more in you. I know the deliverable here. I know you can make this happen. And moving forward here, what do you need in order to hit this number when they think it's not possible? And holding people accountable, that is a part of a genuine love of people as well, and that is servant leadership as well. And it's like, so you're not like going home and flopping your feet up and you're like shouting orders. That's not it. But if you're taking your lane and you're driving forward and you're saying you're doing your part with other people, it's about having those tough conversations as well. And that is loving them at the same time. And that's servant leadership, as well as everything else that we talked about today.
That's right. So, from a tactical standpoint, some of these things we've talked about on previous episodes, but how we sort of practice it at Faris Capital, right? So, those daily huddles I mentioned, super important. It's speed of connectivity, clarity, connection. We keep it tight at 15 minutes, but for the first minute or two, how's your weekend? How's everybody doing? How's everybody feeling? But everybody sees each other, and then we're all aware of what everybody's working on. So, if there's an opportunity for somebody to say, hey, Georgia, I hear you got this challenge. Let me see if I can jump in and help, right? Those weekly level 10 meetings, which is sort of our operations meeting, if you will, space for solving problems, not just status updates, right? We're really diving into the issues impacting our business and the bottlenecks that we need to clear, right? Those same page meetings where on a one-on-one basis, I'm meeting and you're meeting with any of your direct reports, creating support and alignment, right? And then going back to that thing I mentioned at the top, it has to start with the right people. So a hiring process that looks for, people with the right behavioral attributes, that humility, that hunger and alignment with our vision. And, even just taking great care of them on day one, right? I mean, it's so funny. I would say one of the things I've seen more often than anything else is you find the right person, but then the day they show up is terrible. Like there's no plan. They don't know what they're supposed to do. Their phone doesn't work. They don't have their computer set up. So we take it a step further. We set what we call a love bomb, some swag, some gifts, some books to read. We have a huge announcement on that first huddle, and the team welcomes them, and we do like an icebreaker, right? And so, those are just some of the tactics, but really helps us stay focused and has allowed us to not only accomplish our goals, but exceed.
100%. 100%. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoyed the show, please share and subscribe to the channel, where we are building a community of real estate investors that are going after large real estate deals that are outperforming the rest of the market when it comes down to real estate investing. Thanks for tuning in to the Multifamily Investor Playbook. If you are interested in investing, go to fulloutinvesting.com. You'll see our 10-step full out investing process, and you'll see a sample deal on there as well. We love and believe in you guys. Keep dreaming and investing big.